NC State family, it's time for an honest look at your sports world. Let's get you hooked up for Pack Therapy, presented by First Horizon Bank. Here are your hosts, Tim Donnelly and Wolfpack football legend Mike Glennon.
Welcome into another edition of Pack Therapy. I'm Tim Donnelly, as always, joined by NC State great former quarterback Mike Glennon, 10-year NFL veteran, and we have some things to talk about. We're going to break down, yes, it was a win against Western Carolina, but the things that need to be cleaned up for Tennessee, and matter of fact, we'll start with that with Mike here in a second. But first, please subscribe to this everywhere podcasts can be found. Subscribe to our YouTube and tell your friends. And then, as always, as we're doing this year, leave a comment in our YouTube section with a question for Mike, and we'll do our best to get to them next week. So feel free to come back to this video after the Tennessee game, during the Tennessee game on YouTube, and comment a question. And like I said, we'll try to get back to it next week. We have a bunch we'll answer at the end of this episode. Mike, I guess we'll start with the obvious. What held State back from the game that we were all kind of anticipating, where they would put up some scores, put up some highlights, and win by a greater margin against Western Carolina?
I think there was a couple of things. Let's start with Grayson McCall. I think he was a little inaccurate. I don't know if it was jitters, first time playing at NC State, some added pressure, some higher expectations. Was it that he missed a lot of last season with a concussion? He hadn't really played a live football game in a while. From my eyes, it looked like he was more, and you can relate to this as a quarterback, he was more aiming the ball rather than just throwing it. Like a lot of those in-breaking routes that were kind of behind the receiver, you're trying to be too perfect. You're just the guy's so wide open, you're just trying to get it to him rather than just let it rip. And I think the coaching point is like, just get your eyes in front, throw it in front of, throw it more in front than you think, and just have confidence in yourself and let it go. So I think that will get cleaned up. I was the offensive line I was a little concerned with. There was the run game that we were kind of hoping for was not there until the fourth quarter, and a couple big runs. And going back and watching the game, there was way too many times that Western Carolina, their white jerseys, their purple helmets were on our side of the line of scrimmage. The penetration, and when you're playing a team like Western Carolina, there's a reason to have the strength. It's just like, those guys are not physically as strong as you, or else they would be at a different school other than Western Carolina. And then defensively, I just thought it was an okay performance. It was from the very first play, Ken Fordham should have had a pick six, and those are gimmies. And in a game like against Western Carolina, it doesn't cost you, but a game like Tennessee, you need to make those plays. You don't get those gifts all the time. So all across the board, a lot to improve on. There was some positives that I'm sure we'll get to, but it was not the cleanest performance to open the season.
I hate to go so far away from X's and O's, but I'm going to. I was a little concerned with Grayson McCall pressing, and I made this comment on air, when he showed up and shaved the mullet, right? Because it felt like he was – the NC State quarterback is this CEO, and I have to be this very well presented, and obviously the team immediately told him, like, no, grow the mullet back. I feel like that was them saying, we want the guy that cuts it loose that we watched in Coastal Carolina. We want the guy that has the swag and wants the eyes on me. And sure, I think a mullet's a little ridiculous, but if that's you, that's you. And then in the first game, it seemed like it was, the guy that always wears a tank top was wearing a suit. You know what I mean?
That's a great analogy, and it's right. And we don't know what's going on through his head. Was it just, did he just miss some throws? Maybe. But to me, with his experience that he's had and how accurate he's been, I mean, he's a guy that's roughly a 70% career completion percentage. And I will say his number, if you just look at his numbers actually don't look that bad.
65%, 300-plus yards, 3 touchdowns. Like, yes.
But it just felt like when you were watching the game, it felt like a little guy that was either was pressing, was it jitters, was it rust? I don't know what the answer is. But I do expect him to clean it up. The positives, he was going with the ball in the right place. It wasn't the ball was getting out of his hands quick. It was everything that we talked about he was doing. He just missed some throws. And let's give him credit. He also made some throws as well. It just wasn't quite as clean of a performance as we were all hoping for his first start.
Obviously, he'd like to have the interception back, so not every decision was fantastic, but also how bananas are the wide receivers, right? The 65% completion percentage included, as you mentioned, a lot of balls that weren't easy catches. I'm thinking Noah Rogers screaming across the field on a crosser, slams on the brakes and bends backwards, makes the catch. There were quite a few of those that maybe weren't the most accurate throws end up as completions anyway. The way we used to describe those in college was you'd get a plus for decision, a minus for execution, right? The ball wasn't where it needed to be, even if you were bailed out by the wide receivers who, I don't know if this is possible because so many people, we talked about how there's going to be good things. So many people are so worried after the Western Carolina game. I somehow came out of that game more confident in the playmakers, the pass catchers. A whole host of them made a whole bunch of really good plays.
Without a doubt, and we'll start with the obvious of KC. As good as KC was last year, he looked more explosive. He looked like he had more acceleration, more
Stronger.
Juice, strong. I mean,
Ran
all
through
of the
tackles.
above. Like, he took his game to another level, and that's what you expect. I mean, last year he was an 18-year-old freshman. You hope that he continues to grow, but when he had such a good year, you're almost wondering how much more room to improve.
We were last episode talking about how unfair it is to expect just 10 touchdowns because that's a ton. Then he had 3 in the first
It was
game.
already a third of the way there.
I'm going like, you know what?
I was actually thinking that during the game when the guy said, "Do you think Joe Lee or Concepcion will have more touchdowns?" It's like
but Joe Lee looked good too.
He did, and that'd be the next guy.
Productive.
Joe Lee looked really good. This game probably looks a lot different if we don't have an illegal man downfield on the flea flicker. Run a flea flicker against Western Carolina, probably not what you
don't want to
do it. But I thought Joe Lee looked good. I thought Wesley Grimes looked good. I thought Noah Rogers looked good. I think this as
even Anderson, the freshman, there were some plays made.
There as I won't say as bad, but as some of the things didn't go well, and were below my expectations. I thought the skill players on offense were above my expectations.
What about Robert and Nye? You just brought up the flea flicker. I do feel like there was a point, probably about halfway through the second quarter, where it went from, hey, let's try to keep it bland to, hey, if you have to be creative to get the ball to KC Concepcion, if you have to show it on film, show it on film. If you have to run the trick if it's set up, you run the trick play if it's set up. From a game management standpoint on the offensive coaching staff, what were your takeaways?
I don't mind the flea flicker. There's so many different trick plays you can run. Like that, if you're going to show it, that's fine. You can't run against Tennessee. There's 100 others that you can draw up and run.
And most of the time, I'll tell you how trick plays go. You walk through it every single week on Friday, and you never run it in a game, and you just get excited about it. So smoke them if you got them a little bit. But I did. There was like a play action little. We used to call it a slide, little like arrow route from KC Concepcion out of motion, and I'm going like I don't think they wanted to put that on film, but maybe they felt like they had
that.
to.
I will say I wasn't sure how they were going to use Concepcion as a chess piece this year, and it seems like it's going to be very similar to last year. I thought maybe because they had more playmakers around him that they wouldn't feel the need to, but getting 9 catches and the little shovel pass.
Fake touchdown pass.
That should count as a rush, but we'll take it as quarterbacks. But all the different ways they used him, it looks like it's going to be the same kind of creativity as last year. I thought overall the offense felt like last year to an extent, but it was different with Grayson compared to Brennan Armstrong, or probably some more similar to MJ, where it was a true drop back pass game with some naked bootlegs built out of it, a little bit of play action. But there was a chance to kind of spread it out, and then from the run game standpoint, it seemed like a lot of outside zone type concepts where I think there's going to need to be some improvement both from the offensive line, and Jordan Waters feels like a guy that kind of is a little bit of a patient back, but at times I thought it was a little bit too much kind of dancing in the backfield, stretch, cut, get upfield, which he did towards the end of the game.
The fourth quarter wake up is one of the things that Dave Doran and the team has talked about a lot since the game, which is like, hey, that fourth quarter, we finally started playing like we want to. I think Jordan Waters was the most obvious example of that. I don't know if this is the move, but like somebody needs to like insult him before the game or something, because it did feel like because he fumbled, which I saw a stat online from I think it was the Pack Pride guys. He had 333 carries at Duke with no fumbles, and then I think it was the first quarter against Western Carolina. He kind of had a soft fumble, like it wasn't even like one that made a lot of sense. The ball just kind of popped out. By the fourth quarter, though, he seemed mad. The first touchdown run, he was not going to be denied. Second touchdown run obviously showed off the breakaway speed, but like he needs to run. I think Dave Doran called him in the fourth quarter a man possessed. He needs to run like that first play of the very first drive of the game, especially against a team like Tennessee.
Yeah, some guys it's just not their personality to have that, but it's kind of like you got to run pissed off. Like it's got to have an attitude to it. It's got to,
like after the first 3 and out, Grayson needs to look at him and go like, "That's on you, bro." just even if it's not.
Yeah,
right?
find what it is to get him going. But I thought he looked good at the end of the game, and obviously the run game is not one player. There's a lot of guys on the field that contribute to the run game, and but I thought it was good to see him finish strong. But this week, obviously, going to be a much bigger test.
Quickly here, because we'll go to Tennessee and questions in the second part of the pod. You mentioned the defense solid. Was it startling to see a not dominant defense because you are and we are so conditioned to it?
Yeah, well, right away, the first text I sent you, first play of the game, Tony Gibson goes cover 0. I'm like, okay, nothing's changed. But maybe it is
which is, for those of you that don't know, he bringing the house.
Yeah.
Like he and
quarterback got absolutely rocked, and like we said, it should have been a pick six.
And that's Tony Gibson at his finest.
But that's sometimes you live and die on the sword that way, and it can bite you, especially against better opponents. But it just felt they have time to get going, and I wouldn't say they looked bad. That they were also missing number 11 Peyton Wilson, and maybe it's just going to look different to our eyes.
And starting about 2 minutes in, missing Fordham,
right.
Who got ejected with the late hit, sliding quarterback targeting, whatever you want to call it. So he gets ejected after dropping the pick. They did hold back their nickel, who wasn't 100%. They just wanted him 100% for Tennessee. So it wasn't a complete offense, but it wasn't the dominant defense. Defense. It wasn't the dominant defense we were expecting to see or used to seeing last year.
And NC State should have won much more than they did. But I think Western Carolina, give them credit. You could tell they were well coached. They played hard. There were some plays that the quarterback made and all that. Still, defense, everyone needs to play better without a doubt. I just thought that Western Carolina, I imagine, will go on and have a good season.
I've said this on my show. I'll say it here on the pod. I played FCS football, and for a couple of years I was there. We were one of the best FCS teams in the country, made it to a national championship game. So you can give Western Carolina a ton of respect as one of the best FCS teams in the country. I believe they're top 20. While also, like, we knew it when we played against the FBS teams. If we play great, we still need a little help, right? It's like we still needed a big trick play touchdown to be called back on a penalty. We still needed them to drop a pick or two. Like, we still needed the things because the depth, the size, the speed, we're just at a disadvantage there. So give Western Carolina credit for being ready to, especially in the first half, take advantage of the miscues. But if you're State, you play a clean game, it just goes differently. We'll take a break. When we come back, we look towards Tennessee. Big game in Charlotte. And we answer some of your questions from our YouTube channel. So, or Mike will. That's coming up next. Stick around, more Pack Therapy. Back here on the Pack Therapy podcast again, just like all season. If you have any questions for Mike, comment them on our YouTube. We check those before each episode, and we will answer them throughout the season. So come back to it, right? We checked last week's episode right before recording this week's episode, which means if you're watching the Tennessee game and you have a question, after the Tennessee game you have a question, you can always double back and comment, and we'll try to answer them. First, though, Tennessee, big game. That can't be de-emphasized. Like, how different is the prep? It's a neutral field game. It's in Charlotte. It's the Mayo Classic, Duke's Mayo Classic. It's a top 15 team in the country. There's extra, coaches say everyone's the same, but it's not true. This one's bigger.
Yeah, this is what you come to a school like NC State for. I shouldn't say they looked past Western Carolina, but their eyes started,
It would make sense
after the bowl game last year. They're already thinking about this Tennessee game. You play against a nationally known team in an NFL stadium. Kirk Herbstreit and Cruz coming in. It's the primetime game of the week. So this is what you look forward to, and all those off-season work and all that. This is kind of in the back of your mind. This is why we play this game, is to play in these primetime games like they're going to this week.
In a lot of ways, and I think you can use this as a player, State is playing spoiler in that ESPN, the national media wants to crown the next hot thing in the SEC. Nico Iamaleava is one of those guys. He was a big NIL deal. He seems like somebody that everybody is waiting to crown, and you have the opportunity to say, "Not so fast, my friend," to quote Lee Corso. With a young quarterback who's extremely talented, he has every tool in the toolbox. I think rattling him or getting him off schedule would be maybe the most important thing for particular on defense, for State to come out of this with a win.
Yeah, and he hasn't played a lot of football either, so this is going to be a big game for him, and it's going to be his, call it, coming out party in a sense to the whole nation.
They want it to be.
They want it to be,
they want it to be.
Either way, the eyes are on him. So,
Chattanooga
I watched
last
some
week.
of the highlights last week, and I know they were just the highlights, but the kid can spin it, and I was impressed. But he hasn't gone against a defense quite like what he's going to see this week. And it's going to be a great test for NC State. I think last week was probably a little bit humbling. I think it probably, they're going to be focused this week, but it probably honed in their focus even more at practice, because anytime you're losing in the fourth quarter against an FCS team, that's going to wake you up. And I think they're going to come ready to play in Tennessee. A lot of guys from Charlotte. I mean, this, like I said, this is just what you do when you come to NC State. You look to play in games like this and play against a quarterback like this as well.
The trenches. Anyone that talks about Tennessee, they go first to Nico Iamaleava because he is the buzzy headliner. But they'll also, like, man-to-man or woman-to-woman, say this Tennessee team is at their best in the trenches, which some would say is a bad matchup for NC State, based on the fact that Western Carolina was able to push you around a little bit in week one. The offensive line. I mean, State has a future pro in Anthony Belton. They have Zeke Correll, who came in and is a captain and is a 2-year starter at Notre Dame. They have some dudes, Peak, and we could list them all. They're going to be tested in a way that they won't be tested often this year. It could be the best defensive line they see. And
I think that's what the most improvement has to come from the offensive line in the running game, because without that, as good as Casey is and the receivers, this offense is going to need a run game and to get Jordan Waters going. And I think this is why it's such a good test early in the season to see where this NC State team is and where they're going, is playing against a team like Tennessee. You're playing against as good a competition as you're going to see all year. And the offensive line is going to need to open up more holes than they did last week.
So let's say here, let's play a little I don't know, hypothetical game. Your career winds down and you decide to go into coaching, and now you're the quarterback's coach for NC State, right? Hypothetically. And you're preparing Grayson McCall for this game. After breaking down the Western Carolina game every which way, you've watched third downs, you're watching Tennessee, whatever it is. Kind of what's the message for Grayson going into this one?
Let it rip. Again, this.
Love it.
You came from Coastal to NC State to play in a game like this. Last week felt a little, hesitant. Dude, just let it rip. We got nothing to lose. No one is expecting us to win. Go out, have fun, enjoy it, and just whatever happens, happens. Don't worry about throwing incompletions. Don't worry about throwing interceptions. If it happens, move on to the next play. We brought you here for a reason, and that's because we have so much trust in you. You've had an unbelievable success at Coastal, and just go out and get the ball in our playmakers' hands and have fun.
Obviously, you know this. I know this on a much smaller scale. So often, the success of a quarterback in a game like this, they say it's all played between the ears, and I feel like most people, when you hear that, think it's like knowing the offense, knowing reads, studying your film. I think a lot of times it's just the mindset, right? We complicate it so much with all of the football jargon, and you want the, spider 2 wide bananas or whatever it is. But yeah, I think, the main thing for Grayson is, hey, if you make a mistake, like, you're still our guy. Go out there, let it rip, and you have the benefit of having some bananas wide receivers out there, so don't be afraid to let them make a play and make you look good.
Did we just use the bear reference? Isn't that
the bear?
In the bear of the show? Let it rip? Is that what the brother Mikey tells?
True. So basically, you come to this podcast for football expertise, and instead what you get is quotes from television shows. Hey, Carmi, let it rip.
But it's true. I think
which
I always would tell myself, you got nothing to lose. Mm-hmm. Like, just go out. Whatever happens, happens. Sun comes up tomorrow. But just go out and have a good time is what it comes down to. It's a kid's game. It's a game you grew up playing in the backyard, and it's no different come Saturday night, primetime TV.
And I do think, we've talked about this a few times. With Grayson, that's even more important, with Grayson McCall, because you go from – and there's a big difference between 30,000 fans or 35,000 fans and 60, 70, however many are going to be in Charlotte. And there is a tendency to get a little more nervous than you normally do.
And they brought him in here with the NIL component. It's almost similar to when I went to Chicago, signed a big contract, and you feel added pressure. Mm-hmm. It's like, I have higher expectations to live up to this contract, and the NIL isn't, obviously quite that, but it's something. And I'm sure there could have been some of that without talking to him personally, of feeling like he's got to live up to something. And I think he'll settle in this week and have a great game. Let's
answer some questions from the YouTube. And again, you can comment on our YouTube video, this episode, right at the bottom, and we'll do our best to answer them. I have a kind of smorgasbord here. I grabbed 4 questions of varying different topics, and I think the answers will be a little different. Here's let's start with this one, Mike. At David Jones 8164 says, how do you think Anai calling the offense from the booth will affect the game being on the field? Because Anai in that first game was not on the sideline. He was up in the booth. And obviously with so many new pieces on the offense, do you think that affected things, or how will it affect things moving forward?
I don't think it affects things. From what I understand is Kurt Roper is on the sideline now because in the NFL we would get blank pictures. Now they're getting the actual game footage where they're essentially watching film on the sideline, and they wanted Kurt Roper, the quarterback coach, to be on the bench with Grayson to be able to watch the film in between series. And also, I don't know exactly how it works compared to the NFL, but I'm sure Robert and I can still call in the play from the booth. Mm-hmm. So I don't think it's a big deal at all. I always liked kind of having I do like having the play caller there, but oftentimes they were so heavily involved with the quarterback, where it seems like Kurt Roper is more involved in Grayson's ear throughout the week than Robert and I is.
I kind of liked the phone. I liked, like, kind of every time I talked with my OC, because he was up in the booth, it was like there was a point. There was no just like, hey, just checking in. It was, if I'm picking up the phone, I'm telling him I saw this on the last drive, and if it's ringing and he wants me to go talk to him, he's saying, pay attention for this. You didn't do this. Like, it made it allowed me to maybe relax a little bit more on the sideline, knowing that if there's something important to talk about, the phone will ring, and then I can kind of get away from it a little bit.
Yeah, I think that actually is a great point, because that's what the situation was when I was at NC State. Dana Bible, the offensive coordinator, was up in the booth, and when you heard that phone ring, oftentimes it was for a quick chewing, but then it was done, and you didn't have to,
you'd close it down, and you'd look at your backup and say, like, he was really mad I missed that seam.
Part of the reason why he went up there is because he knew that he could get hot, and he didn't want to be in our ear too much, so it got the message across, and then he moved on from it.
Next question here. At Luke Lollies or Lollies asks on YouTube, at what point in the schedule – this is going to become a theme of the entire season, because we asked Mike blank or bust this season, and he said 9 wins. And essentially the answer was, if you're disappointed in 9 wins, your expectations are probably a little too high. Luke says, at what point in the schedule would you be more comfortable predicting NC State breaking over 9 wins this season? For example, if we split with Tennessee and Clemson and are 5-1 midway through the season, would that be enough to predict 10 wins?
I thought when you started the question, I was going to say, at what point in the season are we going to have to start passing the hat to get more money for KC next year?
Which, like yesterday.
Yeah.
3 touchdowns. Price. Yesterday's price is not today's price.
If NC State splits Tennessee and Clemson's 3-1, I think it's very realistic to get to 9 wins. But we see, the ACC is wide open, and you better show up every week. I think it's just so early in the season. We don't even know what the rest of the schedule, how good their opponents are going to be. Really one game in. So I think a lot's going to depend on how they look against Tennessee. Even if if they lose and beat Clemson, I mean, I would probably feel better about it. But I think this week is a true test to see if 9 wins is realistic. If it's a close loss, I think it is. If it's a blowout, we might be having a different discussion.
You brought up the ACC real quickly. ACC panic. Where are you at with it? Clemson, Florida State. The two suing the ACC, but also 2 of the kind of flag bearers for the ACC over the last 15 years, not looking as strong as they have maybe the last 15 years.
Yeah, Florida State, to me, they're done. I don't see them as a playoff contender. I don't see them as an ACC contender. Clemson, it's honestly hard to say. Georgia beats the brakes off of everybody, and really Clemson kept it close for a while. Obviously, the offense is concerning to only get 3 points, but I think it's too early to write off Clemson after getting beat by Georgia. I mean, Georgia beat TCU in the national championship by 60 points. So
a whole bunch.
I don't think we really know who Clemson is just yet.
Last one here before we wrap it up and head towards Tennessee. At MK Sneedy 9923. I don't know if I should be reading these names, but I'm probably mispronouncing them anyway. This one is I'm going to let you handle it however you want to handle it, but it's a very commenter question. Why does it always seem like fans notice changes that need to be made 2 to 3 games before coaches finally make that change?
Because you guys aren't there for practice. You're not there every day with the guys. I mean, I don't think the coaches. Yeah, there's times where I don't think I've had the greatest coaches in the world, but they tend to know more football than the fans. No slight of the fans, but they get paid for a reason, and I think we just have to let them do their job.
My response is because you only remember the times you're right. Because there's a lot of times where you're like, oh, I'd bench that quarterback. Then they go on to lead, a 6-game win streak starting the next week.
Right. I think that's
you never go like, oh, I was wrong about benching that quarterback.
Right. Last year, everyone was calling to bench Brennan Armstrong, only to realize that in the end he was the right guy for the job, and then everyone was probably saying, I knew it all along. I told you they shouldn't have gone to MJ.
You little revisionist history. I lied. Let's do one more because this is maybe the reason I pulled this one. It's from @TheQuantumGemini on YouTube. It's the only person I've really seen that raised any concerns about the skill positions because obviously the wide receivers look great and especially pass catchers in general with Joe Lee. Is there any concern about our depth at skill positions being young? We've had supposedly great talent in the past that didn't pan out. Many haven't played much or at all on this level. Because especially if you get beyond KC, Joe Lee, beyond that, even the Noah Rogers, the Wesley Grimes, they really haven't played a ton, and the next level is mostly freshmen. Yeah,
but, I mean, look what KC did last year. I'm not saying the next KC's on the roster right now, but I don't think you have to be afraid of playing a true freshman. I mean, look, if the coaching staff has that much confidence to roll out a true freshman in the first game at receiver, then I think that tells you that they feel very confident in him. Otherwise, they'd be redshirting him. So that doesn't concern me at all. Obviously, if you get down 3-4 receivers and you're playing other true freshmen, then that's just that's more bad luck, and then you have other problems.
That's Mike Glennon, former NC State quarterback. This has been Pack Therapy. Please subscribe, please like, please tell your friends, and leave comments and questions either during the Tennessee game, after, before. We'll look through them and answer more for you next week. Until then, have a great week, everybody.